everyone, Bernard here. I hope you're all staying safe and well, and welcome to the Citizen channel. We have another episode of the book club today, the City Book Club, and it's not a name that most of us know too much about, this one, and a book I don't know too much about. Certainly I didn't know much about it till I bought it and started looking into this guy. And the book's called, we've got it here, Tale of Two Great Cities. I'll let you decide who the other city is. He's actually wearing the kit of it. That might be a little clue, but obviously I'll let you look at that anyway. I'm not going to tell you today. Obviously, it's a great picture in there. And of course, he was a gentleman called Chris Jones, who was actually born in Altrincham, in 19th of November, my lad's birth date, 1945, a few years before my lad though, so I'm not that old, guys. So there you go. So I'm going to have a look at this one today, A Tale of Two Great Cities by Chris Jones. It was published in 2014. Still available on the internet if you get out there. So we're going to have a look at that one today, and we're going to look at a chapter, a very interesting one actually. It's something some of us know about in City's history. That actually went on a tour of America after winning the league title in 67-68. Sadly, Chris only managed a couple of matches. The very first match he played, I think, of that season, and one round the middle. But so obviously he wasn't entitled to a medal of any sort. But after that season, we sort of decided to go on a tour of America, obviously for financial reasons, not for players' reasons, obviously. So, we're going to have a look at his chapter here, entitled Manchester City Tour of America 67-68. So, obviously, not an overly complicated title for Mr. Chris Jones. So, join me today as we have a look and read a couple of excerpts from that chapter in this book from Chris Jones. Please, if you're new to the channel, push that subscribe button, push the bell notifications so you know these vlogs are coming out, and also check out my film and TV channel stuff as well. And there's some links on screen for Facebook and Twitter. If you're a friend or follow me on there, I do check and follow and friend everyone back, and a little link to my website as well, movieGameNostalgia.com. So if you're any interest in that, please have a look at that as well. Right, but it's book club today, so we're going to have a look at this. Let me know in your comments if you remember anything about. Obviously I probably saw this gentleman play, but obviously in total I think he only made 6 first team appearances and 1 substitute appearance. So not fantastic, but he came to City at an interesting time, didn't he? He had a lot of competition. Obviously he did come in the Mercer Allison era. So we'll get on with this book. So we're going City with the Masters of England, of course. We just won the league title. But over in America, things were struggling. The reintroduction of proper football, not for this other stuff they call football, sort of hit the buffers a little bit, with many clubs losing lots of money. To try and plug the leaks, in December 67, so obviously before we'd confirmed our title win, the two leagues that were at the time in the US merged into a 17-team franchise, which was formed, and just 30 United States players were deemed good enough to play in this. I mean, they did have a quality sort of level. So around the 17 clubs, they sort of sprinkled the 30 decent players. But added to this, they did attract a lot of talent, as you say, with a little bit extra money there coming in from sources in America. They did actually attract quite a lot of talent. Obviously, it wasn't just the late 70s when they got all these like the Pelés of this world and stuff like that. They did attract some good foreign talent, a lot from South America, obviously, in the late 60s as well. So so apart from the late 70s, the US football was probably by the time of this tour by City was probably one of its strongest it's ever been. And of course we went on a money spinning tour to the USA. It was going to turn out to be a bit of a tough one. But with Chris Jones only playing a couple of games in that title winning side, he was still optimistic. He still hadn't been told by Allison or Mercer that he wasn't going to be wanted for the next season. But he was still optimistic, and he hoped to play really well in this mid-season tour, and actually perhaps getting Allison's and Mercer's thoughts for the new 68-69 season. So we'll let him take up the story in this chapter. The first little excerpt I'll read out to you. Following my disappointment at not managing to force myself into the first team for the run in our league championship win, my selection to tour America gave me the feeling that I was still in Joe and Malcolm's plans for the following season. However, the tour was like a celebration for the regular first team players, and we were missing Colin Bell, Mike Summerbit on international duty with England, Mike Doyle was missing for a Young England game, and Alan Oakes did not travel for personal reasons. The tour would become arduous with injuries and 9 matches arranged against Dunfermline, who we played quite a few times, but more on that in a minute, Borussia Dortmund, and the newly formed North American League sides Rochester Lancers and Atlanta Chiefs. The itinerary would have us playing 9 games spread over Canada, USA and Mexico. We flew into Toronto after an 8-hour flight to be greeted with nearly 80 degrees of heat, a lot warmer than when we left chilly Manchester. The hotel we stayed in was a magnificent 160-bedroom place, and the City of Toronto put on a civic lunch for us. Eric Morecambe of Morecambe and Wise joined us and kept the lads in stitches. He was appearing in the show in the city but kept us entertained over lunch. Toronto looked after us very well and arranged a trip to Niagara Falls, which was quite a magnificent spectacle. Francis Lee was heard to say they have something similar in West Orton. The following morning, Harry Dow, Dave Connor and me thought we would go out for breakfast. We ordered up, and when it arrived, we were presented with 4 eggs and numerous rashers of bacon and pancakes. It was enough to feed the whole squad, and definitely not a pre-match meal. We didn't tell Malcolm Allison or Joe Mercer. Our first game was against Dunfermline, who were the Scottish Cup winners that year. Any thoughts that George Farm, their manager, was going to allow the game to be a bit of an exhibition proved to be false as his team set up shop to defend and play on the break. We drew 1-1 in front of 10,000 fans. Most, I think, had come to see Malcolm Allison and Tony Booker, who both played for Toronto City in 1964. We were a goal down at half-time to a dubious penalty, but came out well in the second half, and Neil Young equalised after a minute, running through a square defence to beat goalkeeper Bent Martin. I had a chance to win the game, but unfortunately took a divot and the shot went wide. We believe you, Chris. After the game, we flew straight to New York, arriving there at 3 in the morning and checked into the Sheraton Atlantic Hotel. At 10:30, we were off again in the coach to play Dunfermline again, this time in New Britain, Connecticut. Once more, George Farm refused to open the game out, saying his team's reputation was on the line and he didn't see why he should play an expansive game. As before, we had difficulty breaking down a stubborn defence and went a goal down again. Glimpardo equalised. As Malcolm was trying to keep us going on the touchline, Glyn shouted, "I bet our kid," he meant Alan Oakes, his cousin, who had not come with us, "is just driving off down the 5th at Sandyway." Back came the retort from at least 3 players, and I wish I was with him. Actually, the language was a lot stronger and more descriptive than that. Quite a place, New York, as Neil Young and George Heslop would have testified. They had seen a movie in Broadway and decided to go into the bar for a drink. As they approached the door, a squad of policemen rushed out. It seems they had been only minutes behind a double murder bid, with the fellow having shot his girl and waiter in the bar. They came back to the hotel shaken and said it seemed like a scene from Frankie and Johnny. That's a film at the time. 3 days later, we were moved onto Rochester to play the Lancers. At last, the shackles were off and we were allowed to show some of the football I'd won us the league a month earlier. We won the game 4-0 and Francis Lee turned on the style and scored all 4. We had a strong side out this time, with me leading the attack with Lee on the right, Neil Young, Tony Coleman and Stan Bowles making up a very attack-minded side. The difficult part, so, was that we were really welcomed everywhere. Concentrating on the training necessary to keep up the standards was very harrowing. You have to remember that City were like every other club on tour, wanting to enjoy the experience of a new country. Air travel, receptions, training and playing against different opposition took it out on an already weary squad. Malcolm and Joe were great ambassadors and the team backed them up to the hilt. However, Malcolm, in a country which could match his ego, was garrulous and put us on the spot when we arrived in Atlanta to play the Chiefs in the Brave Stadium. The hotel and the reception put on for a team was spectacular, and a little bit of me thought they were ripening us up for a sacrifice against the Chiefs, who'd had this game on their radar for quite a while. They had been advertising the game for weeks to attract one of the biggest soccer crowds to the stadium. One of the stunts had the team riding through Atlanta on horseback shouting, "The British are coming." We were taken out on a trip to the theme park Six Flags over Georgia on the Chattahoochee River. It was spectacular, but not what we really needed in an approach to the game against the Atlanta Chiefs. It was very tiring. Another reception, a trip on the riverboat, and then back to Atlanta for the match. I was proved right as over 25,000 in the stadium to see if their team could take Manchester City's scalp. It had been 80 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and the humidity in Atlanta was around 80%. For footballers travelling around the country at the end of a long season and being royally entertained, this is going to be a tough night. The Atlanta team was managed by Phil Woosnam, a former Welsh international and Villa player, and we were in for a hard game as the Chiefs treated it like a cup final, American style. Both teams came out from behind national flags, the spotlights were turned on the teams while the national anthems were played, and then each of us kicked a ball into the stands round the ground. Every player was announced individually and waved to the crowd. When Bobby Kennedy was announced, they all booed. It was only later we realised that Senator Bobby Kennedy on the campaign trail was not liked around Atlanta, Georgia. The Chiefs ran the tired legs off our team and managed to come out 3-2 winners. Tony Coleman had given us the lead, but Graham Newton, an English exile, equalised, and they scored 2 late goals before Francis Lee scored from the penalty spot. Malcolm was spitting feathers and tried to say they were lucky. One of the goals was scored by a player 4 yards offside, and we would drub them if we played them again. The truth is the Chiefs had a good team and won that league and the playoff final that year. They would also go on to beat Manchester United twice, so as it turned out, considering we were short of some of our star players, the result wasn't quite as disastrous as Malcolm made out. So there you go. Excuse me. After the Chiefs, it was off to Chicago on a 2-1 defeat to Borussia Dortmund in front of 9,000 mainly German fans in that game. That had been 5 games in 12 games for City, and plus all the long distance travelling. So they were struggling a little bit, and they were beginning to pick up injuries as well. There were flights to Vancouver, apparently, followed by to LA to play on both occasions. Dunfermline again, and in another dire performance from the Scots, City finally had a victory again in another match against Dunfermline when there was a cup at stake, and it would be actually decided on penalties. And City won the game 6-5 on penalties, where one player was actually asked to take all the penalties. So it was actually Tony Coleman took all City's and managed to get the victory for City. The downside, I think, for this, even though we had won that game, was with City were left with just 12 fit players, including the 2 keepers, although Dowd had started to play out, which he had tended to do. He even scored a goal, if you remember, a couple of seasons before in Colin Bell's game for Bury against City, if you remember. So Dowd had actually had to play out with that short players, and Mulhern was in goal. So the games against physical Dunfermline took their toll. Stan Horn had returned home with tendon trouble, and other players had got stitches, and Neil Young had flown home after needing 24 stitches in a shin wound. So Chris takes up the stories at the teams at the hotel in Hollywood. In Los Angeles, we were staying at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, and Senator Robert Kennedy, we mentioned before, the assassinated John Kennedy, was also in LA speaking at the Ambassador Hotel a mile away. Just after midnight, when we were all in our hotel rooms, Robert Kennedy was shot as he walked through the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel. On television, we just heard a commentator saying that something had happened at the back, and he believed a shot had been fired at the Senator, and it had hit him. Johnny Hart, knocked on our door to see if we had seen what happened. He then said, "We had better tell the chairman, Albert Alexander." Albert was a wonderful guy, small in stature, very religious. He always went to bed early. John knocked on the door and a figure appeared, half asleep in a nightgown. Sleepily, Albert asked what was wrong, and John said, "Bobby Kennedy has been shot." Albert's reply was, "What was he doing out of his room, John? We were supposed to be in our rooms." John said, "Not our Bobby Kennedy, Senator Robert Kennedy." The reply came dreamily, "Well, that's all right then, good night." And he shut the door and went back to bed. So our chairman mastered the understatement, let history pass him by. As long as our player Bobby Kennedy was okay, that satisfied him. My apologies for that. Obviously, I'm sure he knew a lot better the following morning. Robert Kennedy was mortally wounded, sadly, as he was taken to the Good Samaritan Hospital in LA. Our game was still played, but a sense of history was all around the city as everyone waited news of the Senator. Robert Kennedy died 26 hours after the shooting. We heard that a man called Sirhan had been arrested for the assassination. Kennedy's body lay in repose for 2 days in St. Patrick's before his funeral mass. His body was interred near his brother's John in Arlington Cemetery. By that time, we had left LA and headed for San Francisco before playing the Oakland Clippers. Mike Doyle, especially flown over to the final part of the tour after playing in an under-23 international for England, had joined us in San Francisco, which would help to give some relief to what was now a depleted squad. We had a crowd of over 25,000, the biggest ever to watch a game in California, and trouble flared in the midday heat. We went to goal down on our players' tempers, already on short fuse after the events with Dunfermline boiled over. Tony Coleman took a swing at Oakland Clippers fullback Gavrich, who went down faster than one of Muhammad Ali's opponents. The American referee Ed Tierson sent Tony Coleman off in the 31st minute, and 3 minutes later he sent Mike Doyle off too for swearing at him. I think by then events had overtaken our ambitions to win the game. We duly lost 3-1 in the midday heat of nearly 100 degrees. Jack Charlton was to take his Republic of Ireland team there at a later World Cup and wanted stops for water due to dehydration. We were literally thrown to the lions and completely shredded with half the squad injured or walking wounded. The heat just finished us off, and Malcolm and Joe didn't have much to say to the press afterwards. The tour was having too much bad luck and wasn't worth the loss of Stan and Neil. Defeats were becoming hard to take, and Malcolm was still looking for that one moment which would turn the tour into a success. San Francisco was a fascinating city to stay in, with Fisherman's Wharf, I've been there, and Alcatraz, I've been there, not to be missed. It was also the time with the beautiful people and flower power. The 67 hit San Francisco by Scott McKenzie, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair, was on everybody's lips during June of 68. This was my Uncle Bill's favourite record over the years, and the song I always associate it to this day. For the connoisseur, the musicians that played on San Francisco were Joe Osborne, a member of the Wrecking Crew, who were studio musicians and ended up in the R&R Hall of Fame, Hal Blaine on drums, and keyboardist Larry Knetchell, who became part of the Bread with singer David Gates. The fourth member of the Wrecking Crew was none other than Glenn Campbell. However, Glenn was not on that record. It was John Phillips of the Mamas and Papas who wrote San Francisco, so you get some music stuff in this as well, who played on the record at the session instead. We flew 2,000 miles to play 2 games against Necaxa and Atlanta in Mexico, but the promoters claimed that Manchester City could not comply with their contract, not having 15 fit players available. Injuries had also taken out Francis Lee, George Heslop and Stan Bowles. The games were called off, but we had a fabulous few days in Mexico, I'm sure you did, Chris, and did a bit of training at altitude. We also realised the next World Cup in 1970 was to be in Mexico, and had a taste of first-hand of what playing at altitude would be like. Joe Mercer was to report back to the FA on the conditions and effects on training at the altitude, so the trip was not completely futile. In Mexico City, Malcolm was thinking about revenge on Atlanta Chiefs. He arranged through Phil Woosen that we would fly back to Atlanta to play them again. It was glutton for punishment, Malcolm, wasn't he? However, the squad was very depleted, and we were playing a very strong side of expats and players from South America, so we were on a hiding to nothing. We lost 2-1, and I had our goalkeeper Harry Dowd playing centre forward with me in front of a record 26,000 crowd. We conceded 2 goals before I managed to pull one back shortly before the end. That final result may have soured Malcolm towards the fringe players in our squad, and although I personally had a reasonable tour, scoring 5 goals in our 9 games, Malcolm came back in a bad mood. We had not taken the USA by storm, and our players were shattered and needing a long rest to recuperate. Malcolm's boast that Manchester City would take Europe by storm in the following season probably slipped away after an exhilarating but tiring tour. Yeah, so Chris Jones reflecting then on that not very good American tour, and yeah, we didn't have a disaster, did we, in 68-69. Obviously we'll talk about Chris Jones's 68-69 again in a future little book club exercise, and also look at how he joined City and stuff like that. So there you go. But Chris obviously he didn't particularly know at that stage that his future was going to be in severe doubt, and I say I don't think he did anything particularly wrong in that tour, but obviously he certainly wasn't going to feature in Malcolm Allison's or Joe Mercer's thoughts for very long. But as I said, we'll touch upon that when we perhaps come back to this book in a future book club reference feature. So hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, if you join me again for my next one, I'll be looking at this little book. Yeah, interesting one. There we go. Troutman's journey from Hitler youth to FA Cup legends. So, fantastic little book. So I'll be having a look at that in the next episode of the City Book Club. Let me know in the comments anything you remember. As I say, I was a bit young to really appreciate that American tour. Didn't really know much about it. I was just getting ready for the old 68-69 season, which didn't turn out too bad, did it, in the end? But perhaps not for Chris Jones. But find out that other city. You probably know who that other city is. I'm not going to tell you. You find out who that other city is, and obviously we may say, as an ex-City player, I'm sure in future book clubs when we run out of things to say about City, which I doubt very much, we'll perhaps have a thing or two to say about his other City club, and perhaps when they actually came back and played Manchester City, which tends to do. That's what football does, isn't it? When these players leave, they tend to come back and either haunt us or do other things against us in the future. So I'm sure we'll be touching upon that in a future book club. Anyway, thanks for watching. What we're going to do with the rest of the day, have a great one. Look after yourselves, look after your friends, look after your families. More importantly, let's all look after each other. To meet here again on the Citizen channel, or perhaps have a look at my film and TV channel. I only ever ask one thing off you Blues, please. Stay safe, Blues. Come on, City. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.